Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to my July wrap up. I'm going to try to keep this kind of speedy because we are already well into August. So let's just go ahead and get into the books that I read in July. I read 15 books. 10 is usually my general goal, so getting 15 I think is above and beyond. Actually, 10 of those books were specifically for videos, so I've already talked about them in some capacity in a video on my channel, and then 5 books were not for videos, more for fun or for other reasons. Looking at the genres that I read last month, the biggest category is no surprise mystery thrillers. I read 7 of those. I read 4 science fictions, which is great because that's another one of my favorite genres. And then I read 2 contemporaries, 1 historical fiction, and 1 classic. As far as formats go, 6 books I own physically and read completely physically. 6 books were ones that I own a physical copy of, but mainly read via audio. And then 3 of the books were books that I do not own a physical copy of, and I only listened to the audio version. In terms of ratings, this was a pretty good month. I had 0 1-star ratings, which is always good. I had 3 2-stars, 6 3-stars, 4 4-stars, and 2 5-star books. So in general, I'm really happy with the reading I got done. To get into the actual books that I read, like I mentioned, the majority were for videos. The first reading vlog that I put up in July was my reading ballerina books vlog. Basically, these 2 books I knew had something to do with ballerinas, so I thought I would read them both in the same video. The turnout is marketed as a mystery thriller. I would say it's a little bit more of like a family drama with a slight mystery in it. It's about these siblings that own this dance studio that their parents previously owned, and an accident happens within the studio, so they're figuring that out. I did not particularly enjoy this one. I gave it 2 stars. And then the other book that I read in that video is The Ballerinas by Rachel Kapelke-Dale. This is much more of a straight up contemporary where we follow mainly 3 girls who went to this ballet academy, and we follow them through their time as students at this academy in the past, and then also present day when they are adults. And I enjoyed this one much more. I thought that it was more entertaining, but also had some really interesting discussions about bodily autonomy and issues within the dance industry specifically, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then in the month of July, I participated in the Summerween readathon. I have a whole weekly reading vlog dedicated to that readathon, and I was able to read 5 books within that week. First one is The Nobodies by Alana Shubach. This is mostly a contemporary book with a little bit of a like speculative element. It's about these 2 best friends who have the ability to touch their foreheads together and then switch bodies. We follow them when they were children, discovering they have this ability, as well as when they were adults. I was hoping this would be a lot more about that special ability of theirs and them using it to their advantage for something interesting, but it was a lot more about like their drama, their friendship, and their relationships with guys in their lives. So I was disappointed by it, unfortunately, and gave it 2 stars. I was gifted this book by the publisher, so thank you to Blackstone Publishing. Even though I didn't enjoy it, I still really appreciate being sent a copy and given the chance to read and review it. The next book that I read that week is The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentil. This is a mystery book about a group of people who are in a library and they hear a scream. They find out that a woman has died and they end up kind of investigating what happened. It's also a book within a book type of book because that story is actually being written by a character in the book and she's getting beta reader feedback, and so we're also reading those letters from the beta reader containing his feedback about that story that we're reading. So it's very meta, maybe sounds a little bit confusing, but I promise the book does a better job of keeping it all straight more than me trying to explain it to you, but I really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. Then I read Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulik. This is a thriller about a woman who gets a job as a nanny for a kid in this really wealthy family. She gets to live with them for the summer and basically spend her time just playing with the kid, swimming in their pool, and it's kind of a too good to be true type situation because creepy things start happening with the kid, and so she's trying to get to the bottom of it. The thing that everybody loves about this book is the creepy drawings that are included within it. I also really enjoyed that aspect of the book and thought it made for a unique reading experience, but more than just that, I really liked the story and I gave it 5 stars because I thought it was a perfect thriller with lots of suspense and great twists at the end, so highly recommend if you for some reason have not heard of this book yet. Then that week I read Bird Box by Josh Malloran. This is a dystopian kind of horror type book about this world where something starts to appear and anybody who looks at this being goes insane, kills themselves and anyone around them. So the society quickly shuts itself in. Everyone wears blindfolds if they go outside, and it's about our main character Mallory trying to survive kind of this apocalypse. This has been adapted into a movie on Netflix, which I saw and loved, so I knew I eventually wanted to read the book, and Summerween was the time. I enjoyed the book almost as much as the movie. I think it would have, of course, had more of a shock value if I didn't know what was happening at the end, but I still really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars, and very interested in reading the sequel. And then the last book that I read for Summerween is The Cellar by Natasha Preston. This is about a teenage girl who gets kidnapped and is held in a cellar with other women who are all named a type of flower and being held hostage by this man who wants to create like his perfect family. Very creepy and interesting premise. This actually was a Wattpad book, which means that it was written online incrementally, which I think is a very interesting way for a book to be published, and I think it's awesome that this had that opportunity to then be traditionally published after enough readers enjoyed it and loved it on Wattpad. I unfortunately don't think it made for the best book, whether that's due to lack of editing or just the way it was written in the first place. I go even more into detail with that idea and my thoughts in that Summerween vlog if that interests you, or if something I just said wasn't clear. But unfortunately, this book ended up only being 2 stars, so I was very disappointed by it. Okay, the next video that I did in July just recently went up, and it was my book of the month reading vlog. I got 3 books in my most recent book of the month box and read all of them. So the first one was The It Girl by Ruth Ware. This is a mystery thriller set at a university. We follow our main character named Hannah, I think, who is roommates with a girl named April. April is the it girl. She is rich and popular and beautiful, and Hannah kind of gets swept up into April's friend group. And then by the end of the first semester, April ends up dead, and we then follow Hannah years later as an adult when the supposed murderer who was in jail convicted of murdering April dies himself. The murder comes back up into the news and everything, and Hannah is not quite sure that that guy actually was the murderer, so she's trying to figure out what actually happened to April back in the day. This was okay. I thought it was perfectly fine. That premise to begin with isn't one that super appeals to me, so I wasn't necessarily expecting to love it, but I still wanted to read it because I do love Ruth Ware as an author. So I thought it was entertaining enough. The last like 25% of this book was my favorite. I thought it was very fast-paced and full of twists and turns that I didn't see coming, so I enjoyed that and would ultimately recommend this to Ruth Ware fans or to fans of like that dark academia student gets murdered type of thriller. And I gave this 3 stars if I didn't say that already. Then I read Upgrade by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi book. I have loved 2 of Blake Crouch's previous sci-fi books that he's published, so I had really high expectations for this one. Unfortunately, they didn't quite live up to that. This is about a futuristic world where gene modifications have become possible. They've become somewhat mainstream, but they are illegal. So we're following an enforcer of that rule who is very anti-gene modifications, but then he ends up in the middle of a situation of somebody trying to basically upgrade the human race, and he's trying to stop that. For some reason, this just didn't impact me as much as Blake Crouch's other 2 really popular sci-fi books that I loved, Dark Matter and Recursion. Those are both 5 stars. Just something was missing in this book. I don't know what exactly it was, because I liked the book on paper and in theory. I just didn't connect to the characters as much as I was hoping. I wasn't as invested in the plot as much as I was hoping, so it just fell a little flat, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. And then lastly, in my book of the month vlog, I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is a very emotional contemporary book about these 2 characters named Sam and Sadie who became friends as children and then reconnected again as college students and went into business together creating video games, and follows them for a long period of time after that as they work through their business together, their creative partnership together, and really explores their relationship outside of that as well. Like, do they have a romantic connection? Are they meant to be anything more than friends or business partners, or what's all going on? I have seen so many people love this, and I'm so happy for those people. I just unfortunately didn't. I found this book to be really, really sad, which sometimes I can be on board with, but this one just didn't have enough happiness to make the sadness feel worth it, if that makes sense. And I just didn't connect with the characters enough to really root for them or to want to understand, you know, what they wanted out of life and want that for them. So just kind of missed it for me. I also gave this one 3 stars, unfortunately. So now on to all of the books that I did not read for videos. I have 5 of them left. Let's go ahead and talk about them in ascending order of rating. So the first one I have is called Some Maintenance Required by Marie-Renee Lavoie. I actually got this book through Libro FM through their ALC program, which gives audiobooks to book reviewers. I had never heard of this book until it was offered as an ALC option, and I haven't heard or seen anyone else on BookTube talk about it, but I still thought I would give it a try because the synopsis sounded interesting to me. This is described as a coming-of-age story set in 1993 about a girl kind of stuck in her hometown who has bigger dreams for herself and her future, and kind of how she is trying to go about getting that. This was a very like slice of life story. I think we're only following her for like 1 summer, so I found it to be a little unfulfilling and I kind of missed the point of it. But I know some people really like that type of book. They like just reading about an ordinary character in their ordinary life for a very short period of time. This book was really short. I think it was only like 5 hours long as an audiobook. So I would recommend it if you like that type of story specifically, but I only gave it 3 stars because it didn't really resonate with me. Then I read The AI Who Loved Me by Alyssa Cole. This is a very different book. This is a romance about a human woman who ends up falling in love with an artificial intelligence man. And it was really interesting because it's in a slightly futuristic setting where a lot of the world has been overtaken by artificial intelligence. A lot of household appliances and vehicles and all of that have AI incorporated within them. So it's sort of part of everyday life, but still our main character is trying to figure out what that means for like an actual human created out of AI and what developing feelings for that type of person means. I liked it for the most part. I mean, I like futuristic sci-fi books to begin with, so I was all in on the exploration of AI in our day-to-day lives. The romance portion, though, was a little weird for me. And then the last like quarter of this book totally switches tones and turns into more of like an action type book. So I was not expecting that. It was jarring. I didn't hate it, but I definitely didn't love it. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. I would recommend it if you are interested in something kind of off the wall, very different, but a quick, fun, interesting experience. Okay, then I read Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. This is a book that I have been meaning to tackle for a long time. This is my husband's book. He's read it before. He told me he enjoyed it, and he told me he thinks I should read it. So I've been mustering up the courage to tackle this book because all I had known or heard about it before reading it myself was that it is very long, very dense, and very confusing. But the overall premise still sounded interesting to me, so I knew I wanted to read it someday, and this month was finally the month. So the overall premise of this book is we are following our main character, and he is in the military in World War II. He is a bombardier, so he is a fighter pilot. He is stationed in Europe, and he wants nothing more than to get out of his pilot duties. He wants to be discharged from the military, he wants to go home, he wants to be safe, and so he is doing everything in his power to do so. However, there is this rule set in place called Catch-22 that says that the only way a pilot can be discharged from his duties is if he is diagnosed as insane. But any pilot that goes to like the doctor or whatever and tries to get the doctor to say that they are insane so they can leave proves that they are sane, because no sane person would want to fly a fighter jet and fly in a war. So if they come asking for that, they will not say they're insane because they want to get out, so they have to stay in. Not sure if that totally makes sense. It is kind of a tricky concept to wrap your brain around, but it is the origin of the phrase Catch-22. When you're in a sticky situation, there really is no winning, and you just get caught in this cyclical reasoning. I primarily read this via audio, which I highly recommend if you're looking to tackle it. It just helps you get through it because the writing style of this book is very unique and could be very draining to read. I actually liked that part of it. The writing style was probably my favorite part of this book. I found it really humorous, and actually it reminded me of having conversations with my 2-year-old. And I wish I had marked some specific passages in here to read or something to give an example of what I'm talking about. But an example of a conversation I might have with my 2-year-old is I would ask her, Krissa, do you want a drink of water? And she would say, yes, I do want a drink of water. And then I would say, okay, I'll get you a drink of water. What cup would you like? I would like this cup for my cup of water. And then once I fill it up, I'd be like, okay, here's your cup of water. And she would say, thank you for my cup of water. I'm not even sure if that is making my point, but it's just a conversation where you just repeat the same thing over and over. And it's like each person needs to come to terms with what is being said and say it themselves and say it in their own terms, but basically repeat what the other person just said. That happens so many times in this book. And again, I found it hilarious to read, but I can totally see why people would read that and just get so aggravated by it, especially because this is like a 500-page book. So by the time you're at the end of this book, you're definitely like, all right, I get it, that's enough. But I liked that, and I also liked the overall message that I kind of got from this book. And before I even go into that, I will say that I am not a literary scholar by any means. I have not studied literature, so I might be totally off base with what this book is trying to say. And if I am, I'm sorry, but hopefully we can all agree that books are subjective and people can interpret things however they want to. And that's also kind of the beauty of books, is that people can get out of it different things. So that being said, what I got out of this book is that a lot of times people in leadership positions of whatever organization you're talking about, whether it's the military or corporate America or anything, whoever's at the top, first of all, is just a person. And second of all, might be a not very intelligent person. And the conversations in this book just prove that. And like, people will just get themselves into cyclical arguments in order to prove themselves right, just because they're saying they're right. Or they will reframe whatever conversation is happening and reorder the words in order to prove their point, even if somebody else is coming at them with their same words in a way that disproves their point. And I think it's very political in nature, very relevant still today to arguments that people have sometimes. And ultimately, I don't think this book solved any of that. Like, I don't think it had anything profound to say in like how to combat that. It just had moment after moment of relatable conversations where you just want to pull your hair out because people are being so dumb and thinking they sound so smart. And if nothing else, it helped a little bit to be able to realize that this has always been going on, probably always will be going on, and eventually you just have to laugh about it and move on and focus on what you can control in whatever situation is happening. So with all that being said, clearly there are things that I liked about this book and that resonated with me, but on the other side, there are also things that I did not like about this book and that I had problems with. One is the depiction of women. I don't think there is a single female character in this book that isn't described as a prostitute at some point, and that's just gross and annoying. Also, the length of this book is just a little too long, I think. I think it could make its point a lot faster, and I didn't need to read about the same situation happening so many times. I definitely got the point. So ultimately, I'm giving it 3 stars. I am glad that I read it. I'm glad that I have my own opinions about it. I would definitely say it's not for everyone. I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone unless any of those conversations I just said sound super interesting to you. I have heard that the miniseries for this book on Hulu is good. Reading this book actually started out as a buddy read with my friend Lauren from Lauren Love Reads. She ended up DNFing it. She had watched the miniseries and was interested in the book after watching that because she liked the show, but said this really was nothing like the show and she liked the show more. So with that in mind, I might recommend the miniseries in replacement of the book. If you are someone who wants the general gist, but doesn't want to have to slog through 500 pages of the same conversation happening over and over again. So 3 stars and definitely a bucket list book knocked off of my TBR. Okay, the next book that I read is called Acts of Violet by Margarita Montemor. I actually had received a physical ARC of this book from the publisher, which I'm so grateful about because I really enjoyed this author's previous book called Una Out of Order. But Acts of Violet, I actually lent the physical copy to my mom to read, so I don't have the physical copy with with me anymore. But this book is about this female magician named Violet. She rose to fame really quickly. She's a really good magician, and basically at the height of her fame, during one of her magic acts, she disappeared. No one knows where she went, not even her own family. And in this book, we're actually following the sister of Violet as the 10-year anniversary of Violet's disappearance is coming up. And her sister is basically having to deal with all of that coming back up into her life. She's been trying to move on, but can't seem to get away from her sister and her notoriety because she was never told anything by her sister. She has no idea if it was intentional, if her sister meant to disappear, or if it was more sinister than that. Did someone take her or kill her or what? She has no idea. She's been trying to move on, but she can't because everyone else in her town and around her is talking about Violet, and so she's dealing with that. Overall, I really like this one. It is kind of a weird book because it's not really a mystery. Like, the sister of Violet is not trying to solve the mystery of what happened to Violet, but everyone else in her life is. There's a podcast host with a podcast about it. She has a daughter who wants to know more about what happened to her aunt, and so it's a really interesting, like, non-mystery mystery, if that makes sense. A little bit slow at parts, but I was interested the whole time. I also am just a sucker for magicians, especially female magicians, so I liked that aspect of it as well, and I gave it 4 stars. And now, finally, the last book that I have to talk about is a good one. It is another 5-star book. It is my favorite book that I read in July, and honestly, it might be my favorite book that I've read so far this year, so I think I can confidently say it will be one of my favorite books by the end of this year, and probably one of my favorite books of all time. That is The Measure by Nikki Erlich. I only picked this up because of my friend Gwen. She has a podcast called Talk Bookish to Me. She also has a Patreon for that podcast, and as part of her Patreon, she decided to do a buddy read this month. She picked the book. She just said, anyone who wants to read this with me can read it. This was the book, and after reading the synopsis, I was like, definitely I am in. Sounds right up my alley. And it ended up being the best buddy read of all time because this was an amazing book. This book starts with everybody in the world over the age of 22 waking up one morning, the same morning for everyone, and finding a box sitting outside their door with the inscription, "The measure of your life lies within," and inside the box being a string that they later find out represents the exact length that your life will be. And understandably, this starts a complete frenzy in the world. Most people look inside their box and they see, like, do I have a short string or a long string? What does that mean for myself? Is this actually true? Other people decide they don't want to look, they don't want to know how long they have left to live, but then they have to deal with their friends and family knowing their own lifespans and pressuring them to look and find out their own. And we basically just see how this situation unfolds. And I absolutely loved this book. Not only is that premise extremely intriguing, but I thought the execution was just perfect. So many times in this book, I would have a thought like, well, what about this situation? Like, for example, what if somebody tried to commit suicide? This book explored that. Or how does this affect mass casualties or mass murders? This book addressed that. It goes into politics and how the government tries to regulate everyone and their boxes and their strings. It goes into the medical industry and how does triage work when you now know whether or not somebody is going to live a long life. Do you treat the long stringers before the short stringers because you know that they are destined to live longer? And there's also this really interesting, like, chicken or the egg argument. I just thought it was so interesting, and I could talk about it all day long because, again, it covers so many topics. I was just completely enthralled the entire time I was reading this. I think Nikki Erlich covered everything I wanted her to cover, and I think she did it very well. We follow many different characters in this book. Some of them know that they have short strings, so they're grappling with the fact that they're going to have short lives. We're following a character who chooses not to look at her string the whole entire book. So a multitude of characters, and it's all about how these strings basically change everything. I could not recommend this book more, and I hope that a lot of people read it. If you do read it, please message me so we can talk about it. This was one of the most interesting books that I have ever read, and it was also emotional. Like, the characters in this book I just fell in love with. On top of the situation they're in, I fell in love with them as people, and I really felt for them and these newfound difficult situations that they were in. This book was just so good. So Obviously, I had a real winner there, but overall, I thought it was a really awesome reading month. And little spoiler, I'm already into August and it seems to be going just as well. So I'm so happy with all of that. Please let me know how your July reading month was. Did you have any new unexpected favorites, or did you happen to read any of the same books as me, and what were your thoughts? But I do think I have been talking for long enough. So other than that, I don't have anything else. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one.